Hi folks, this is Donald. So my parents own an antique quill that is supposed to be used for writing in the olden days, and as I was looking at it this week I got thinking, I wonder what it's like to sketch with. So I'm going to have a go at sketching with it and see what it's like. It also comes with this little inkwell, and if you lift off the little metal lid then there is a slightly rusted metallic pot inside, and I'm going to pour some ink into that pot to see if I can use it as it was intended to be used all those years ago. So I'm using the Atramentis black document ink, and I'm going to pour some ink into the well for probably the first time in decades that anyone has done this. It has clearly never been used for a very long time. In hindsight, I did put slightly too much ink into the well. I realised that I'm now going to be left with a well full of ink that I'll have to use because I overestimated how much ink I would actually need to use in this drawing. Before I started on the sketch, I wanted to see what it was actually like, to see if it was actually going to create a line and how wide it would be and how long a single dip of ink would last. And the first thing that struck me was how thin the line is. I mean, this is a proper original fine liner. I mean, look how thin it is, and it's coming out very nicely. I was quite shocked that this actually does work as a pen. I was kind of suspecting for some reason that this wasn't going to work. It just seemed a very odd thing to be holding a feather and drawing with it. But yeah, it seemed to be coming out all right, and I thought, maybe I will be able to do a drawing with this. However, it should be said that even though it looks quite smooth, it felt incredibly scratchy to draw with. It really wasn't feeling like the experience I normally have drawing with any other kind of pen, a fountain pen or a fine liner. It's nothing like that. It's very scratchy. And let me just play you some audio recording that I recorded separately of what it sounds like scratching across the paper. It's quite excruciating, but also in a way slightly satisfying to hear. So on the basis of this little test, it just didn't feel right to draw in my normal way. I just felt like this more naturally lent itself to a fast, scratchy, scribbly type of sketch rather than a solid line type of a drawing that I so often do. The beauty of that is that I can show you the whole drawing in its entirety in real time because it only took me about 7 minutes to do the whole scene. And I decided to draw this little scene that is in a library in England, and I thought it looked like the sort of scene where someone in the olden days would have been sitting with a quill writing away Shakespeare or Dickens or someone of that nature. I don't know if Shakespeare did much in the way of sketching, but I could imagine if he did, this is the sort of thing he would be doing with his big quill and inkwell. And I loved the way that when you move this quill across the page, it was skipping and it was creating this effect where the lines were broken up and there was such a variation in line width. It's incredible how much variety you were getting from a single stroke. There's some bits of ink that are thick, some bits that are incredibly thin, and it's just so different in that respect to drawing with the kind of fountain pens that I've been using. And the lines were really enhanced by the fast, instinctive type of sketching that I was trying with this. This is quite removed from the way that I typically draw. I've done one or two sketches that have been fast and instinctive like this, sort of, but not exactly. I've never been able to create this kind of line variation before, and I just enjoyed this so much. It was so liberating to just be swishing the pen across the page, and if you draw something wrong, it doesn't matter, like the table wasn't quite wide enough, so then I just added another line upwards and made the table wider. It doesn't matter with this kind of sketching, and it's so freeing. I loved it. In my typical way of drawing, I would have had to have drawn the lamp in first before I drew in the entire table to make sure there weren't lines cutting across each other. For this, doesn't matter. I can draw in any time I like. Lines just cross over each other. And no, it's not fine art. It's not something you would hang on your wall. But I tell you what, as a drawing experience, I think this is fantastic because it is just so much fun and you don't have to think. It's just pure instinct. And I think every single time you draw something in this way, it's going to look totally different. There's no way when you're drawing at this speed that you could get something that's identical every time. And I had absolutely no idea that just changing the tool that I'm using to draw with to something so old-fashioned and outdated would have such a significant effect on the way that I draw. In any other video, if I just decided, oh, I'm going to draw that scene, that looks quite a nice little scene to draw, I would have just drawn it in my normal way. There's absolutely no way I would have drawn it in this way. But almost as soon as I picked up the quill and dipped it in the ink and felt what it felt like on the paper, the scratchiness of it, I just thought, no, I've got to draw this in a different way. This is not going to work in my normal way. And then what I'm seeing and what I felt like as I was drawing it was so satisfying that it's making me question my entire approach to sketching now. Don't get me wrong, I love the time that I spend doing drawings that are 4, 5, 6 hours like I've been doing recently, really absorbing yourself into the activity. But what a joy to be able to sit and do an entire drawing in 7 minutes and then you can say, oh, that's finished, great, done. It's just such a different experience. It's given me a lot of food for thought, sketching with this kind of quill. I mean, it's not a practical solution for everyday sketching, but it does give me something to think about if I can find another instrument that will allow me to do that with this similar kind of line variety, because potentially this could change everything. And this scratchy way of drawing brings me back to probably my drawing hero, the children's illustrator Quentin Blake. I think I might have talked about him once before on a video I did a long time ago, but I grew up reading the Roald Dahl children's books and he was always the one who illustrated them. And I loved his scratchy drawing style, which is not a million miles away from this sort of thing. And I was watching a documentary about him recently and he was showing you his process and it was ink and watercolour. So he was drawing a scratchy drawing like this and then would splash some watercolour on it. And he made it look so easy, of course, because he's been doing it his whole career and it's not easy to get anywhere near the standard of drawing that he does. But this instinctive scratchy style is definitely in that direction, although I'm pretty sure he doesn't use a quill. I think that is pretty much unused nowadays. I can't imagine anyone is still using these, although maybe they should, given how much line variety you can get from a single stroke. And I was quite surprised how much ink you were able to get out of a single dip. I mean, it lasts quite a long time before you have to go back into the inkwell. I should also point out that my parents said, the antiques dealer said that the feather was not the original one that came with the inkwell. That was added separately, and they were able to verify through its history where it came from and the fact that it was a found feather, so no animals were harmed in the making of it. And that was really the only justification I had for using it, was if any animals had been harmed in the making of it, then I certainly wouldn't have used it. But since it was a found feather that was just turned into a quill that was then put with this inkwell, I thought, well, fair enough, that seems okay to use that in that context. So in the spirit of Quentin Blake's sketches, where he leaves a lot of white space and keeps things fairly minimalist, I felt like I had drawn a sufficient amount to capture the scene without going over the top and cluttering it up with too much, because I think there is a danger of that when you sketch in this way. So I decided to leave it there. It has been a fascinating experiment for me to try out, and I hope you found it of interest as well. And if you'd like to see more sketching inspiration like this, you can click on this video right here, and I will see you in the next one.